2011 World Series, one of the greatest comebacks of all time. The picture on your right, is a picture of pure ecstasy. The comeback is complete, going on to Game 7, finally win another World Series. But that was not possible without Nelson Cruz not knowing how to play right field on this side. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, a fly ball, not an easy catch, but you're a professional baseball player. Literally, it's your job. And he looks like that against the wall. The ball hits, falls. And the comeback was possible because he could not catch a ball. They literally had the plastic up in the visitors' locker room. They brought the trophy down. They had gotten everything ready to go until this moment. And most of the comebacks take just a single opportunity, just a small sliver of hope, and everything turns. And in this game, it's Nelson Cruz, who now is a DH, probably a good choice. Don't even try to play the field, right? But it changed everything. Everything changed from that one moment. And in every comeback that exists, right, there is that time where things turn, where everything switches. And so we're going to be talking about the comebacks that we want to have in our lives. What's that moment? What is that thing that changes? What's that thing that small thing that happens that, hey, this is possible now? All right, and so we talked last week about, hey, Jesus' comeback from death and from dying on the cross, obviously a big deal. That makes the comebacks we have in our life possible. But what is the point to where you and I, when do we start that comeback? When do we start? What is that thing that changes to where everything can be different from that point on? And so we are going to look, kind of the big idea is that, hey, a comeback is possible because Jesus has invited me to be a part of it. It's a simple, invitation that he has invited me to be a part of. We're going to look at the life of a guy named Matthew, who was one of Jesus' disciples. He wrote a book called Matthew, right? We're not going to look at that book today, though. But Matthew was a disciple, but he was also a human being, right? I think at times when we look at people in the Bible and be like, oh, they kind of floated everywhere. They had robes, the little, yellow, halo thing that was always around their heads. That's not real. That's just paintings, okay? But he was a real guy, and he wasn't a great guy. But he had a moment where everything could change, and he responded to it. And so we're going to look at his life tonight. So a little bit of background on him. He was a tax collector. Does anyone have a job? You pay taxes. Congratulations. It's the worst, right? And it only gets worse from here because the more money you make, the more money they want, right? And so the tax man in our day is the IRS. Don't spit or anything. They're just doing their job, right? But they aren't viewed upon kindly, right? It's not like, oh, I just would love to get a guy to come and audit my taxes and make sure I'm giving the government exactly the amount I need to. And no one loves the IRS. It's not someone brought puppies. No, that guy brought the full weight of the law to make sure you gave him all the money, right? And so it's not a good view. It was worse back in this day because tax collectors weren't just, hey, this guy's doing his job and he happens to be doing something you don't like. They were basically mobsters. They were known as thieves, swindlers, whatever you want to call them, right? They would have this system to where they'd say, hey, we are going to bid. It'd be like an episode of Pawn Stars or Storage Wars or something where hey, I will give you $10,000 to cover the taxes for this district. And they'd do hey, what's the high of a bid here? Okay, you have won this bid. You went to $12,000. So you will collect $12,000 of taxes from this area. But the Romans said, hey, you do whatever you want. You can collect $2.5 million. I don't care. We just get our 12. And so these guys would go out and they'd force people to pay taxes well above that $12,000, whatever it was, and they would make themselves rich and build a life for themselves on the backs of their people. Not exactly like the kind of guy you want to invite over for Christmas dinner, right? These guys are known as cheats. They could not even be called as witnesses at court because they were just known as hey, if he is a tax collector, he's the most dishonest human being in the history of mankind, and we just can't take his word, so don't even bring him into court, right? They were hated. So this is a guy that Jesus has called to follow him, right? He is a guy that has chosen a life of greed, luxury, comfort at the expense of his character and a walk with Jesus. He has chosen to do that. Right? He's made some bad choices in his life. And he has abandoned the call and purpose that God made for his life to follow what he wanted. And before we kind of get like, okay, he's a bad dude. Like, I don't know why Jesus called him. Stop for a second. Hey, look at your own life. You and I, we run after what makes us happy, what fulfills our desires. We want to build a life we want for ourselves, not necessarily look at what God wants for our lives. And we've abandoned God's purpose and calling because we want to follow our own wants and desires. We're not that different from him. And so the question would be, what happened that this guy has gone from thief, horrible human being, tax collector that makes himself rich on the backs of the other people versus a guy who Jesus uses to build the church? Because there's a moment that happens. And so we're going to look at that this evening in Luke chapter 5. If you have your Bible, turn there. If you want a Bible, throw your hand up. We'll bring one to you. You can keep it. If you want to look on your phone, that's fine. If you don't want to, it's up to you, right? But we're going to be in Luke chapter 5, verse 27, and we're going to look at a very brief story of when Jesus had this moment with Matthew, and it changed the direction of his life, and his comeback began there. So Luke chapter 5, verse 27 says this, after this he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi, which is also Matthew, just a different name for him, sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And leaving everything, he rose and followed him. All right, pretty simple, straightforward story that's going on here. So what changed everything? He heard Jesus invite him to follow him. Now, that's kind of a weird thing. If you're at, say you're at Schnucks, guy in a white panel van with a balloon pulls up and says, "Hey, come follow me." Don't. I'm looking at you, Bates. Okay, don't do that. Don't you get in that van, okay? Right? It's kind of a weird phrasing, like, "come follow me." Like, okay. It's not what we would use now. But this invitation, it's a big invitation. Big in terms of what Jesus is offering to him, even bigger in terms of who Matthew is. All right, so he hears this invitation. Jesus goes out and finds him, right? It says that after this he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi. Jesus was not just wandering around like, "I need some disciples," and he turned and saw the first guy like, "Oh, I guess he'll do." Yeah. No, he went and he was looking for this guy. So these tax collectors would sit in basically what a lifeguard booth on the beach in California would be, kind of raised up high. They would be kind of on the edge of the land or the beach area where the ships would come in, because they would want to be able to see, and they're up high, they want to see, okay, those guys came in with a buttload of fish, I'm going to tax the crap out of them, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, these guys brought in a bunch of stuff from somewhere else, I got to make sure I go tax them. So they're up high, and they're on this thing looking for these people. So it's not like Jesus just walked by and peeked in a little tiny shack or something and he's there. He's up high, Jesus had to go and find him. It's a busy area, it's the center of commerce for the whole area. It's like going down to Times Square, all right, and finding the guy up 2 or 3 stories up that's keeping an eye on everything. So he went and looked for him, and he goes and he asks him this question. He says, "Come follow me." It's a command, but it's a question as well. All right? And what this question meant then, what was a rabbi or a teacher would say to a student, to someone who they said, "Hey, I think this person's got it, and they can follow in my footsteps, and they can do what I do and carry my legacy on." So it's hey, come learn underneath me. Come learn what I can teach you. So there's that invitation. Go ahead and put your hand up. We'll get it later, all right? All right, it's come and learn underneath me. But it's also even bigger than that, because remember, this guy's an outcast of society. People hate him. They cannot stand him. This is a guy that has to hide as he goes through the city, because people know that's the guy that charged me double. And that's why my kids didn't eat. That's a guy that went and bought himself a new, tunic or something, and my family's got nothing. They hated him. And so he is not loved in society, but Jesus is this rock star who people want to be around and are drawn to him, and he is inviting and said, "Hey, come be a part of what I'm doing." It's welcoming him back into society and acceptance. But it's also this change of direction in his life. Hey, you have been making yourself rich on the backs of other people. Now I'm asking you to come be homeless with me. It's a big change, right? And he is also inviting him to live his life for something else other than himself. And Matthew's response says a ton. This account is in the book of Luke that we are reading now. It's in Mark, and it's also in Matthew. So there's Matthew's own account here. And we're not going to read that one because Luke has a much better view of it. Because Matthew just says, and he got up and followed him. Luke says, and he rose, and he got up and followed him and left everything. All right? Think of what this guy's leaving. He has no family. He has abandoned everybody to make himself rich, comfortable, and have the life that he wants. He's got nothing besides this job. And this guy he doesn't know walks up to him and says, come follow me. And he gets up, walks out of his booth, leaves it. So he's walking away from his job, his livelihood, his comfort, his money, his home, everything that gives him anything. He has become nothing in a moment when he walks out of there. Matthew just says, and he got up and left and he followed him. Luke says, and he left everything, because Luke understood and saw, hey, this guy gave up a ton. I think it's interesting to note here that Matthew didn't say that, because what he noticed was when he got up and left was everything I've built for myself is nothing in comparison to following Jesus. He just met him, but there's something about that moment that says, hey, he is different. He changes everything. He's worth following. He's worth becoming homeless to follow. He's worth giving up every luxury and rich that I have in life in order to follow. And so he goes and he follows him. And he left it all to follow Jesus. See, we don't necessarily know how bad something is for us until we're exposed to what's really good for us. Because Matthew loved his life. And then he met Jesus and realized the life he'd built for himself was nothing in comparison to what Jesus was offering. I had a class in college called Urban Ministry, and for part of it, we had to spend a weekend homeless in the middle of February on the streets of Springfield, not Missouri, Springfield, Ohio, right? And so we had 48 hours. We left on a Friday night, we come back on a Sunday night. 48 hours, you put your parka on, you wear as much clothes as you can, you borrow a sleeping bag from a guy in Rotsey, right? And you go out and it was literally like what you'd see in the movies, you're standing around a trash can, just barrel of fire. And just, it's cold, the minutes tick by, it takes hours for a minute to pass. It's just long and grueling. We were there for 48 hours. It was not bad at all. But you start to stink. You smell like fire, you smell like sweat because it's cold at night, hot during the day, but you're wearing all these clothes. But again, we're with other people that smell just like we do, so you don't even notice. And we walk to church on that Sunday morning, and we go to church, and we're all sitting in a group, and you're used to your own stench by that point. But then I get home to my dorm room. My roommate did not go on this trip. My roommate had showered that morning. And I walk in, he goes, dude, what? You stink. Right? I gotten used to it, right? And we get used to the stink of the lives that we build for ourselves. But until someone points out and says, hey, that's not what you should smell like. Burn that coat. Never wear it again. Seriously, the guy that I borrowed the sleeping bag from, he's like, it was never the same. Sorry. I'll pay you. No, I'm not going to pay you for it. That's expensive. But, right? And so when we're exposed to the ugliness of the lives we build for ourselves, when we compare it to what Jesus offers, we're willing to leave it all. We're willing to leave it. I did not sit in my dorm room and say, I don't smell that bad, right? Come on, let's watch a movie. No. I took my clothes, put them outside our window to air out, and went and took a shower, 3 showers, right? And Matthew had this moment where he says, hey, nothing in my life is worth keeping. I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to abandon it all because of an invite. And he recognized that what can be found in Jesus is better than anything that he could build. And then there's a really cool part here, right? As we wrap it up here, very end, we're right here. We're almost done, right, Turner? I don't know if we're 15. We're probably over. There's some stories I told that I didn't plan on. But so the cool part of this story is he leaves everything and he follows him. Then verse 29. And Levi made him a great feast in his house, and there was a large company of tax collectors and others reclining at a table with them. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled at his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus answered them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So Matthew gets up, leaves everything, goes back to like the one thing he still owns. He's got this sweet house, right? He's like, hey, my fridge or whatever they had at that point, chock full of food, it's going to go bad. I'm not going to buy any more. We are going to blow this place out. I'm bringing all my friends and throwing a party. And your first thought was like, does this guy not get it? Like, he's going through this extravagant life. But then we read what he said. He said, and Levi made him a great feast. See, he got up and left and said, Jesus, you're coming over for dinner, and it's going to be awesome because it's the last one I'm going to be able to afford, right? And then he invites all of his friends who are just as messed up as he is to come to this feast. And you have the religious, like people are sitting there like, well, why did he invite them? And Jesus is like, shut up, right? That's basically what it is, right? He's like, I didn't come to hang out with people who think they're too good to be fixed. I came to hang out with people that are willing to look at the invitation I'm offering and say, yeah, my life is nothing. I'm going to follow you. He throws them this party, and he says, hey, Jesus has invited me to leave everything in my life, and I want these other people to be a part of that. Which means that he must have understood that, hey, whatever I'm about to give up is nothing, and what I just got in Jesus is so important that I want everybody who I know is just like me, this can help them too. This can change their life. And I want them to hear it before I can't even afford to buy them dinner. A comeback requires a radical change from building my own life that worships my desires to a life surrendered to Jesus. And that's what Matthew shows us here in 3 quick sentences. When Jesus offers you that moment, that option says, come, follow me. You get up and you leave it all. A radical change. But the door is open, but the comeback is possible because Jesus has invited you and me to follow him. Everyone in this room has been given that invitation. And the question is going to be, what do you do with that? You may not have a tax collector booth on the beach, but you have the life you've built for yourself. You have everything that you're putting your stake in. You have your reputation. You have whatever gifts and talents that you think that make you who you are. And whatever thing you've been working your life for. It may not even be horrible things. But Jesus says, I'm inviting you to leave behind the life you've built for yourself and follow me into the life you were meant to live. And the question is, are you going to get up and follow him and leave it all? Or are you going to sit in your booth, count your coins, and bank on the life that you built for yourself? Matthew never regretted it. He didn't have an easy life. Right? He walked around with a homeless carpenter for 3 years who was then murdered, rose from the dead, then went up into heaven and said, good luck, they're going to try to kill you too. But it was worth it. Because what he found in Jesus was worth more than he could ever tax his entire town for the rest of his life. The question is, what are you going to do with that invitation? And you may be here and you say, hey, I just came because I wanted to hit people with the pool noodle a little bit. That's fair. You may be here and you have followed Jesus your whole life. Maybe you're somewhere in between that. The question is still the same. Will you leave it all to follow him? If you're here and you don't know what that really means, you have questions, I'd say don't sign up until you learn more. But ask. Man, we'd love to talk to you about that. Or we'd love to help you understand what it means to follow him, why it's such a big deal. It's the God of the universe gave his life for you and says, I have a life for you that I created you for, that you're never going to be satisfied with anything else until you live the life that I have created you for.